Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Security Confidential. Today, we have some very interesting guests on our show. We have our own Kevin Casey, who's our fearless leader. We have Philip Rich on the show as well. Phil is a partner of Dark Rhinos, as his company does a lot of work, Leadhouse, with us. He's one of the co-founders of Leadhouse. And he has been kind enough to join us this morning, along with his partner, Kevin Swift, who is also a co-founder of Leadhouse, and he's joined us this morning. Good morning, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us on the show today. Appreciate you guys being here.
Hey, well, thank you for having us, guys. And I think we have a debut on our side, but also on Kevin's side. I think it's the first one he's joining on the Dark Rhino team.
That's exactly right. Kevin does not usually get on these shows, and this is a first for him. So we're looking forward. He's usually stuck back there in the back room. We're pulling him out to the front.
I feel like I just got off of the practice squad for an NFL football team, and I didn't really make the team, but they asked me to fill in because the punter got sick.
So I thought it was actually because you're excited to talk to me and Phil.
No, that's simply not the case. Not at all.
Oh, Phil.
And I brought my dog.
These shows are a volunteer lineup, and in this instance, everybody stepped back, and Kevin was the last one standing in the front. So.
Wait, you're saying we're not getting paid for this?
No.
Oh, well, we can send you a
day.
Bottle of bourbon.
That's
we can
right.
do that. We can absolutely. Well, actually, you guys are Canadian. Does Canada allow shipment of alcohol across the border?
I don't know. That sounds like a Phil question.
I don't know.
I'm not sure, actually. I'm pretty sure duties for this are probably through the roof if they do go through. But I've never tried.
And Canada is one thing now too, but right, you have to deal with the SAQ as well in Quebec, which is an extra layer of annoyance here for alcohol.
So, you know, guys, everyone listening on this show, we have essentially 4 entrepreneurs on right now, and you know, we're gonna discuss a couple things here with this group. I wanted to start with one topic. It's a question for everyone here. This is now Manoj's personal belief that there is very little correlation between your level of education and success as an entrepreneur, or for that matter, success in life.
And I think, to me, it's all about, first of all, for me, it's a no. For me, I agree with Manoj here, it's a no. And I think one of the reasons for that is you can teach work ethic. It's very hard to teach work ethic. You can try to push it as much as you can, but if you're not, it's just a different breed, right? Entrepreneurs are a different breed of people. They're people who it gets you sick to your stomach to work 12 hours a day, but the next morning it's also what gets you up and drives you in the morning, right? It's what's exciting to you in the morning is, God, here's all the issues I have to deal with. And at night when you finally go to bed, you're like, finally the day's over. But the next morning, it's kicking you out of bed.
I agree. So for me, and this is my 9th company, I would attribute entrepreneurship as building a business is really about a marathon and not a sprint. In the last 3 years that Manoj and I, since we've started this organization, we've gone through a few equity partners who felt that we should be where we are today when we first started. So if I use the analogy that building a business is more of a marathon than a sprint, I think that's one of the good advice, something that other entrepreneurs could take and listen to.
Absolutely.
Phil, your thoughts?
As to whether a degree versus...
Yeah, do you need that education? Do you think you have to have a heavy education?
I'll bring you back into my story then. So I do have a degree in urban planning, in which some of these classes or courses got me ahead of the curve in terms of marketing and reporting data points to a lot of either our current clients or our past clients. I think it gave me a boost to be more successful in this side of things, especially on the PPC side, on the funnel creation side, how to attract more customers and how to actually report and make better decisions throughout the process. But to be honest with you, this is probably the only aspect that I would have kept throughout this degree, and I would honestly believe I would still be at the same stage in my professional life if I hadn't gotten that degree.
I
And
would go ahead. I'm sorry.
sorry, Mano. So right now we're kind of attributing the question to whether or not a degree is useful to grow a business, like to start a business, grow a business, be
Right.
successful. But even within our own industry, so even within the tech industry, we've seen how developers who learn on their own are often better developers, are better problem solvers. Even to the point where, at least here in Quebec, some of the stuff that they would teach in university for programming is none of the stuff that you're going to use in real life. So a lot of the courses are kind of backdated. I don't know if it's because it's too hard to keep up, with the curriculum. Exactly, there's like a time lag between the current technology that's being used by tech companies and what's being taught.
Yeah, and so one of the things I would add, Manoj, too, as it relates to your original question about whether or not an advanced degree is warranted or needed, or even just a degree in general, I would just simply state that it's okay not to have all the answers. In my experience, I came into entrepreneurship with a very well-rounded education and a certain set of experiences, but none of which, or very few of which, actually prepared me for the challenges that I faced and continue to face as an entrepreneur. And prior to this opportunity with Dark Rhino, I was a lone entrepreneur. So having to rely on my own skills, my own faith, my own belief, passion. But I feel that now having equity partners, and that they bring certain sets of skills and their own sets of experiences, and it's okay that I don't have all those answers. So, going back to the original question is, I don't think that in today's society that you necessarily need an advanced degree. You need to, believe in yourself and have the passion and the commitment and the willingness to accept risk that comes with being an entrepreneur.
So, and Kevin, very well stated. And on that, there's something that there's a couple things you stated there, and I think at the end of the day, if you have the ability to think, and I have a degree in engineering, and I don't use any of that today, but what I do use of it is that ability to think, and that's what I got out of it. So, and if you look at passion, perseverance, it's a marathon, not a sprint. You're going to have a lot of challenges. You must have that ability to think independently if you are going to be a successful entrepreneur. I think that's a lowest common denominator that unites all of us. But there was something else, Kevin, that you stated, or that you've often said, but it's related to your earlier statement here, is you have to, I forget how you always stated, I'm going to paraphrase, that you have to, what are you willing to trade for what you're willing to get, and I think that's a really important statement. A lot of people want to make a lot of money. A lot of people want to start their company. A lot of people want to do a lot of things, but there's a real trade involved there. And maybe you can expand upon that a little bit.
Yeah, I would say
it's nothing's free.
Yeah, so I would say it's a combination of two things. One, it's finding your balance. For me, when you run a business, you're simultaneously being pulled in 10 different directions at one time. There's fire to flight, and there's always the problem that seems to be needs to be resolved. And when I was younger, I would allow those things to negatively impact me, or let them become angry. Or and I was very, very, very impatient. And what I realized is that, as the captain of the ship, it's really super critical that I'm making decisions that are predicated upon the best use of information that I have at this time. And the fact that sometimes it's very important that we walk away from what we do and find exercise or yoga or golf or whatever it might be, and just find that balance within the organization.
And I think a good thing to add to that point, Kevin, is you have to kind of choose your battles, and I think one of the best skills as an entrepreneur is knowing how to surround yourself with the best people that can fill in the gaps, because it's impossible to know everything, right? So you have to sort of delegate and surround yourself with people that are good in stuff that you're not, and therefore everyone's kind of pushing in the same direction, and filling in those gaps.
And we're wearing so many hats at the same time as well. So especially at the startup level, it can become a tornado quite fast, to be honest, sometimes.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's probably one of the huge or main differences between a startup and a corporation, right? Is like Phil said, you're wearing 4, 5, 6, 7 hats, whereas often in a bigger company, you're kind of isolated into a role. In a company like ours, what we tell people that we hire is, whatever you do, right, whatever role that you're coming into the company for as a startup, it will impact the company. Every move that you make, whether it's a positive or negative impact, it will impact the company, because we're so small. Although we're doing very good and we're growing, you're still small compared to the mega sharks. Right. Every move that an employee makes, every day is impactful, either on a small scale or bigger scale, depending on what the role is. But nothing goes to waste.
That reminds me of one of the founding principles at Dark Rhino, and it really was it was borrowed willingly from a gentleman named Simon Sinek. And I don't know if you have ever read any of his books. He's done TED Talks. One of the TED Talks is How Great Leaders Inspire Action. And that was the first time that he introduced not what companies do, but why. So it's not how or what, it's always about the why. So as an entrepreneur, and especially at Dark Rhino, when we were setting out to be different, it wasn't about what we do or how we do it, but it was why we do it. And I feel that entrepreneurship is much more about the why, because a lot of that is intrinsic than it is about what or how. So I think that makes us better leaders, and if we focus on that as well.
What's the definition of a startup? When do you stop being a startup? Because we're going to be 2 years old here in 19 days. And
congratulations, by the way.
Yes, congratulations.
Yeah, which again is a huge milestone. Given that Leadhouse is a combination of a few companies that existed, so it's not like we're fresh out of the womb 2 years ago, but still, you kind of have these milestones normally where once, I forget what the stat is, but a huge percentage of startups don't even make it to the 2-year mark or the 5-year mark or the 4-year mark. So when do you define yourself as not being a startup, and what's those milestones, and what do they really mean after all?
Years ago, when I was in graduate school, I would define that as long as a company is still searching for a business model, it's called a startup. As soon as it's found a business model, it's no longer a startup. So it's regardless of the time, it has to do with its ability to execute upon a strategy that they wanted to implement. That would be, I feel, how someone would define that.
I love this definition, actually.
This is a question for both you, Kevin and Phil, is that you guys are in technology as well, and you guys do a lot of web development. You do hosting, you do a lot of things that a lot of other companies do, and you've made it 2 years, and you're growing, and you guys do excellent work. But how do you differentiate yourself in the market?
I think one of the first things, and it's interesting you say that, because we do hosting and we do websites, right? But we like to compare those to our hot dogs, right? So if you're kind of selling hot dogs at a corner stand, the websites and the hosting are sort of the byproduct and the quick in and outs, right? So someone will come for a website, they'll be in for a very short sales cycle. We develop the website, it goes out, and it's good for the business. If you stop those hot dogs, right, you're stopping people from kind of showing up to your shop, even though they're not the biggest margin or the biggest, revenue for our business. We actually, the majority of our business is actually focused on mobile app development and web applications, right? So more complex backend structures, managing a lot of businesses, automating a lot of tasks, and then within the mobile space, mobile applications for clients, either for B2B purposes or B2C purposes. We also have a lot of games. So one of the things that kind of sets us apart is, the level of artist designs that we're able to bring into games, AR, VR, 3D rendering. And that's where we kind of, I think, separate ourselves from the kind of majority of web agencies, right? The typical web agency is going to kind of do a little bit of website here and there and a little bit of marketing here and there, but not to the level of being able to produce, 3D rendering in apps and in AR and VR. I think that's where we really set ourselves apart from the typical agency. And then, like I was saying earlier, I just don't think that we can sell ourselves as being better developers than anyone else. There's a lot of good developers at a lot of good companies. I think the experience that you give to your clients is where you really make the difference between yourself and the next guy.
I want to switch back to a comment, Kevin Swift, that you made earlier about the number of startups that fail, right? I think the statistic is 90% is probably the lowest number, and depending on what rag you read, it'll be somewhere in that continuum or that order of magnitude. But I don't think that folks listening should be dissuaded by that, because there's a few things that we don't know in that number. Is as Kevin stated, how many people, it's a marathon, right? So how many people actually quit the race and they were so close to finishing it, right? We don't know that. We don't know how many of those people were actually qualified to be a functional business to begin with, right? So I would be really curious, and I don't think there's ever been a study done on, if you had the right management team, the right product ideation, and the market had a need for that service, how many of those companies actually end up not succeeding? I don't know what that answer is, but I can't believe it would be as high as 90%.
I think part of it, and I love this part of the discussion because we talked about this a lot, and I would be more than happy to discuss about our own struggles. And it's not always been fun and easy, right? We've had our own share of really important struggles. But to come back to your question is, I think there's even an aspect of timing. Sometimes you can have the good idea and the good execution, and timing might be off. A small percentage has to be attributed to luck as well. Of you kind of meet the right person at the right time and something kind of sparks. And on top of that, it's crazy. You read these stories on LinkedIn of a company that raises $500 million for something,
Yeah.
and then they go bankrupt within 6 months, right? I think there's also just a level of mismanagement or trying to maybe hyper accelerate your growth, and you kind of just hit a wall. But yeah, I mean, we've had our own.
That's also a problem of the venture capital and private equity firms too, that they invest willy-nilly. And well, let me rephrase that. They don't invest willy-nilly. That's wrong. I think there's undue pressures on startups in general to achieve certain revenue and profitability that's often unheard of or unrealistic in the first few years, thus increasing the likelihood of failure. That's why only 1 in 10 of VC's investments typically pan out.
And Kevin, there's I don't remember the number offhand, but there is a significant difference in success rate between those startups that are VC backed versus those that were bootstrapped. The bootstrap crowd is way ahead on the success curve. And maybe that speaks to some of the soft elements. It's not about the money. It's about, do you have the perseverance? Do you have the mindset? And do you have that self-confidence that you are going to succeed and you are willing to make certain trades? Because in your personal life, there are going to be trades. It's not going to be, I am done at 5 o'clock in the evening and I'm going to go to the kids' soccer game every day.
We'll
It's
need
not going.
another podcast for that
Right.
aspect. Yes,
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of pressure that comes on the family with things like
absolutely.
that. But what are you willing to give up for what you want? And that is a fundamental question that every entrepreneur or would-be entrepreneur better really ask, because you are going to give up stuff.
And unfortunately, it's not always super clear how close the end of the tunnel is, right? Sometimes you feel like you're kind of getting to your drowning point. You don't realize that the next corner is finally where something goes in your favor. And you have these kind of challenges every couple of weeks, every couple of months, depending on where you're at in your company. And it's like, man, do I want to spend the next 20 years kind of always having this internal debate about, is it all of this worth it? And I think it's hard, and I think just some people aren't built to be able to handle this for enough time to really turn that corner.
I would agree, Kev. For me, in my experience, people always say, well, you have such a high risk tolerance. That's absolutely not true. For me, I believe it's the ability to understand and accept the risk associated with it. And I know it's just a slightly different bent or twist on those words, but it's that ability to say it's not always going to be okay, but believe that when you wake up the next day that you're going to get up and put your pants on and get dressed and you're going to do your best effort. And it's through that determination, that commitment, that never give up attitude that truly does separate people that are successful from those that are not. And the other thing I would ask, and we have this with some of our equity partners as well, less with Manoj, because he's been there with me before, but it's the ability to make an informed decision that's often gray. It's not black and white. You don't. It's not like financials or mathematics or science where there's a defined answer. Often you have to make a decision that's predicated upon the best known information that you have at this time, and sometimes it's the wrong decision. And the ability to then pivot quickly and say, geez, I screwed up, I made the wrong decision, and I need to make a different one is imperative for successful entrepreneurship.
And that quality of experience does, information, does come with experience.
It does.
You will always make better calls throughout your company when you failed at certain projects, certain other companies so many times, right? We learn from these mistakes. And I truly believe that learning from these mistakes is actually what sets you apart from the others.
So Phil, I feel you're spot on. And maybe another way of saying that is the willingness to compassionately say, I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's okay not to know something. It just really is. But it's that ability to go out and find or to research or to get the answers that separate, again, the people that are or are not successful.
And it's kind of crazy that you mentioned this because we just discussed the problematic with certain types of developers versus the ones that we feel do the best is actually the ones that jump into some aspects of a certain project and don't know how to actually render out this project. And they'll go out there and do the research, test some stuff out. And most of them that do grind, that grinder mentality, they will come back with the solution.
Well, if you back in the 80s and probably the early 90s, if you look at organizations like General Electric or Honeywell or Procter and Gamble, they had true management training programs or executive training programs. And so let's just assume that I graduated with an MBA from University of Pennsylvania in finance. So P&G would hire me, and there was an expectation that you were going to work in finance. Well, when you get into the management program at P&G, they take a finance guy and they put him in human resources, and then he has to learn the human resource aspect of the business. And then they take that same individual and they put him in sales and they put him in charge of a product. So you're like, what the hell am I doing? I'm a finance guy, I'm a CPA, and what am I doing selling product? Well, the reason for that, the fundamental reason for why Procter and Gamble, General Electric, and other successful organizations in the 80s and 90s did that is because they wanted men and women that were well-rounded. They wanted them to understand different aspects of the business so that as they rose the corporate ladder, they had more experiences that they could relate to so they could make better informed decisions. And I feel that's part of what makes entrepreneurs successful as well. Manoj, any comment on that?
No, Kevin, I agree with you, and B, I think it also it provided opportunities for people to quote unquote fail successfully, and that doesn't mean that Procter and Gamble or GE or any other megacorp is or any company is looking to say failure is a great thing,
Mm-hmm.
but as Phil pointed out, there just can't be success without failure, and giving somebody that varied experience set forces them to operate in the gray area. When you operate in a gray area, you're going to make decisions that you don't know a lot of, based on things you don't know a lot about, and you are going to make those mistakes. And you got to get comfortable with that
Mm-hmm.
if you're going to be successful, or you will not be successful. I
And
mean,
I think Kevin, when he was talking about risk tolerance earlier, I think there's two levels of risk tolerance. There's as a person, how much can you tolerate? But then as a company, right? How many little failures can you tolerate monetarily as a company before you just have to crash, right? So when you're taking risks and decisions to hopefully grow, as you stated, as a person, you have to be ready to take that risk. But then as a business, you can only afford to take so many of these risks before you just can't afford them anymore.
Businesses typically, hopefully, still transacted on a personal relationship.
well, Kevin, how many RFPs have we participated in that we knew we were column fodder going into it, right? I mean, there's no.
But what was interesting, again, we can publicly, we won't make the announcements, but we came in second in every one of those. We went against billion-dollar companies, and it sucks coming in second, like Kevin Swift said. But the fact that a small company like ourselves was asked to participate, and we made it through 4, 5, 6 levels of weeding out, and then they ultimately make a decision because one company's 6 billion in revenue and you're 6 million, the risk tolerance to that megacorp is less with the $6 billion company than it is with the 6 million. But the problem is, as we all know, and Kevin, and Phil, I would agree, is where these large organizations fail, at least in my opinion, is they go with the safe, and rather than an organization like ourselves or like yours that are predicated upon thinking outside of their own paradigm. And in our experience with getting participatory with some of these CIO roundtables or CISO roundtables, there's no innovation in these big companies, or very little innovation. And and I think we as an entrepreneur community have to continue to challenge these stoic institutions to think outside of the half a dozen billion-dollar companies that are out there providing either managed services in our case, or in yours, custom web development and application development. So
I think one of the other points here is I always like to compare the big companies to a big container ship, right? It's very slow to kind of turn around and do something different. Whereas we're kind of like a speedboat, right? So it's very easy for us to kind of turn on a dime and go from having a complete left turn to all the way a complete right turn, even 360 on ourselves a few times. But a huge corporation, some of our huge competitors, sometimes our advantage is the fact that we can turn on a dime and do something quick or turn around faster or make a change. And I think that plays into our advantage a lot.
Agreed. And Kev and Manoj mentioned it earlier. We talked about or we alluded to our why. But one of the other founding principles of Dark Rhino Security was something that I fervently believed in, and I've used in every one of my organizations. And to be very truthful, it took Manoj a little bit to understand the concept of blue ocean strategy, what that meant, why it was important, and how we as leaders within DRS could implement and execute a value innovation strategy. So Manoj, maybe you could share some of your own experience with realizing why that was important for you and how it benefits and how you think it differentiates us in the market.
Well, differentiation is key to the success of any business. I don't think anyone here is going to argue that point, or anyone listening is going to argue that point. But how you achieve it is paramount, right? You can traditionally achieve it with having a product that is 3 or 4x better than anybody else in the market. You can come up with a new service idea that no one had thought of. And that's when people think innovation, those are the kinds of things they're thinking, something totally brand new, out of this world. And those concepts in reality are very rare, right? But there's this whole idea of value innovation as well. You can be in an existing market and essentially shift the cost value curve that's associated with that market without getting into heavy economic theory, but that's the basics of it. And blue ocean strategy is about doing just that, so that even though you may be providing a service that others, or a product that others may be providing, or some combination thereof, you are fundamentally packaging it in a totally different value offering that sets you apart, and you is in essence metaphorically wind up in a blue ocean where you don't have the competition, and the competition becomes irrelevant, quote unquote, to a large degree, right? I think for me, when Kevin, that this was Kevin's idea, that was his vision, but turning that vision into strategy was a very difficult and painful exercise in my own experience.
A lot of failure.
Yeah, a lot of failure. I mean,
Well,
we did the Thomas Edison thing. We can tell you about 2,000 things that don't work, right? but we have found 1 or 2 things that now do work, and they're core to what we do, right? But it was a painful experience. It was not something that we say, all right, this is our vision and strategy, and this is what we're going to do on day one.
You have to know how to evolve.
You have to know how to evolve.
And
you must. And
pivot quickly.
We pivoted a lot in our own experience, right?
What I see, so Kevin and Phil, this is directed at you guys, and in the short period of time that I've known you, and I mean this in all sincerity, there seems to be much as like Manoj and I have garnered a healthy respect for one another, it appears that you and Phil, Kev, have the ability to respectfully disagree. You may not always, I don't know you all that well, but you can each see one another's perspective. But at the same time, you probably have some healthy arguments at the same time, just like Manoj and I do. But, at the end of the day, you have each other's backs. So when you have equity partners to know that, you can fight like brothers, but at the end of the day, there's just something about going to bed and waking up the next morning knowing that your partner has your back, and that's I think it's very important. So
100%.
Yeah,
And
you guys have
obviously
that.
we do have different avenues of thinking as to how we can get from point A to point B in most of our projects. But how can I say this? No matter the course we would take, we know that we have the experience and the will to get to that point.
Yes.
So obviously this does cause some road bumps, and we'll tell each other off, and maybe 5 or 10 minutes after, we'll
It's all
apologize and
good.
we'll get on to something else. But
Hmm.
I know for a fact I could leave my bedroom right now, because obviously we've been working remote since COVID,
Yeah.
and that there's a very important project that's possibly that has a deadline for tomorrow. And even though I could not be there, I know it will get done.
Yep.
That's the
Agreed.
most important part, and that comes um, with experience. That comes with trust. Um, and you're right when you mentioned that you wake up the morning after, and then I don't know about you guys, but my kids wake me up at 5 in the morning. But I'd say 5, 10 minutes after, uh, I'm back on the computer looking at all these projects that we have and just trying to reassess where we were yesterday and where we are today. And I think that's a very, very that's something that not everyone can do, right?
Hmm.
But
Agreed.
I guess I call it passion, to be honest.
Yeah.
So
I
let
think
me, on that note of passion, and we're coming upon, towards the end of our time, which all of you have been very generous with, and I thank you for that. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a show. But um, I would, in parting, like to ask one question of all of you. I'd love to get everyone's opinion on it. As business owners and entrepreneurs, if you were to boil down your number one challenge that you think that you faced, what would it be in the journey? I'll start with Kevin Casey first.
Oh, God, I'm still thinking. Um, yeah, so Manoj, I'm 58. I'm the oldest of all of us here on the list. So I feel that the question could be asked in the same way, but given different answers based on where I am in my life, both from a financial or economic perspective, an emotional perspective, or other various answers. However, to try to say or try to answer the question, um, it was never. I'll say what it wasn't. I always believed in my ability to execute, always. Um, so I always believed in myself. Um, I would say if I had answered the question, I'm sorry, I'm stumbling here. Is
That's okay. It's a tough question.
Yeah, it's a tough question. Just is actually I would probably God, that's hard. um,
Think about it.
I am trying to. I think I'm going to
so.
pass right
So,
now. Go
Mr.
ahead.
Swift, what's your thought?
It's funny, Manoj and Kevin, because it is a very difficult question, right? And I think one of the things you just said, Kevin, is you can always trust yourself, right?
Hmm.
So I guess it kind of comes back to the classic, if you want it done right, sometimes you just have to do it yourself. And what I noted down here after Manoj asked the question is one of the, I guess, biggest challenges is trusting the right people, especially at the beginning when, again, you can only survive so many bad moves.
Hmm.
It's kind of like playing. So for us, we never took an investment, right? So we started the company with $0, right? And we were cash flow positive kind of from day one, right?
That
And
sounds
we kind of
familiar.
ran with that,
We are the
right?
same way, 100%.
Right. And then I guess the difference between a company like ourselves or someone who starts with an investment is you have a little bit more padding to make the mistakes. And for us, the biggest challenge was a combination of monetary resources and trusting the right people. Because if you trust the wrong person, you burn through the very little cash flow that you do have to be able to move forward and grow. And that was a big challenge. You know, they always say that you make money with money. So when you're starting with zero, you're kind of playing catch up for a long time just to be able to really start growing and solidifying your business. So for us, I remember the times where just making payroll on a Tuesday, you know, it was like, okay, you know, are we okay this week? Are we going to be fine? If there's ever anything, we know, you know, me and Phil are the first ones to cut out. And even for a long time, we took nothing, right? We were putting it all right back into everyone else. I've always told our guys that if you're selling a product, you're really focusing on that's what you're selling to the customers. But our product is you guys. Our product is our employees. We put everything into them. It's what we invest in. And
Mr. Rich, your thoughts?
I really have to go with what Kev is saying. I would also, man, it's tough. This is so many memories are coming out through this podcast. I wasn't expecting this. Honestly, if we were to do this all over again, the Leadhouse experience, I would have the same, and I'll call them failures at the beginning. Why? Because we've learned so much from these failures. So I don't see a kind of like another path where if we were to restart this all over again, I don't see different kinds of challenges coming in the way. We would be ready for these challenges, but the same thing would happen.
I have an answer for you, Manoj, to the question. Give Phil a little chance to think about, because it is a very, very difficult question. I wish you would have asked us in advance so we would have prepared.
Yeah, but then it takes away from the naturalness of what our show is.
This is totally unscripted.
It is unscripted.
Totally unscripted.
So I have an answer, at least for me, and that is sense of urgency. If there was one thing I could change, and that is to have that others would have the same sense of urgency that I do in order to get things accomplished. And that simply just doesn't happen very often.
Well, I'm going to answer this as well as being a part of this. And for me, it really, the biggest challenge was getting out of that mindset and realizing, more importantly, that a lot of decisions that I was making, or whether it was regards to the business or anything else in personally, were made out of fear.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's been a big change for me, is getting out of that mindset. I'm not going to make a decision out of fear. Not going to do it. You know, we're going to do what needs to be done as it needs to be done. And if it's something we don't want to hear the answer to, that we know is going to be a negative answer, that's okay. You know, I'd rather know some of those things. You know, bad news doesn't smell any better with time. You know, it's going to
smells worse.
It smells worse.
I guess I even have a question for Phil, is kind of knowing everything we've gone through, and now we know kind of the end result. So it's kind of like you go up the hill, but you don't really know what's on the other side, right? Is it all worth it or not? You know, going in blindly again, would you do it again, Phil? You know, is it something you would be ready to go through again?
I think
emotionally, probably not. I would say not at this stage. This whatever we have struggled with and accomplished at the same time, it does take a toll on you, to be honest. If we were to redo this tomorrow, I don't think I'd be able to. At least not with a major setback of a couple months or a couple of years.
Yeah.
And that gets to, you know, what were you willing to give up for what you wanted, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
there's there's something.
These are things you can't learn for our audience in business school. I don't care what MBA program you go to.
No,
You're
but you
not
can't.
going to get this.
Whatever life throws at us, it's the ability to overcome. And I feel that all of us on this podcast have demonstrated the ability to overcome no matter what's ever been thrown in front of us.
And kind of one of the last points that I wanted to mention that goes with what Kevin just said and Manoj said earlier is maybe my generation is more frail to some things. And to Kevin's point is they want everything now, but they don't necessarily want to work for it. And
Right.
kind of translate that into, it's easy. Hey, Kevin, it's easy for you. You don't have to go to work if you feel like crap today. You're your own boss. You're lucky. But then again, they don't want to make that leap because they want to make sure that they can buy whatever they want tomorrow and know that the salary's coming in, right? So it's like they want the plus side without having to work for the annoying side.
Mm-hmm.
And that, my friend, is human nature. And on that on that note, I know you guys have been very generous.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining this episode, and appreciate everyone's feedback. Take care, everyone, and have a great weekend.